This is part 3 of my 3-part series on practicing drums with practice pads. Now that we've talked about why pads are great for practicing in general and what I like so much about these FootBlaster pads in particular, let's put them to good use and learn what I consider to be my 2 most important techniques for playing fast blast beats and double bass. Let's start with blast beats. Especially with my left hand, which is the snare hand in a traditional blast beat, I use the finger control technique. It's a bit different from the French grip, and I don't know if that's the actual name or if there even is a name for it, but basically the control comes from the fingers, so let's just call it that. So before step 1 of learning the finger control technique, the way I hold the stick is a little more rotated inwards of the French grip, for example, and I have a tiny little gap open between the thumb and the index finger. So basically the stick is resting on the 4 fingers down here, and the thumb is going to be the pivot point of the stick. Step 1 would be to find the balance point of the stick. And by that I don't mean the point where the stick is evenly balanced and just resting on 1 finger, for example, but the point where the rebound of the pad or the snare is getting transferred the best into the stick. So if you just take your index finger and drop the stick, if you hold the stick too far back, you notice that the stick just stays basically on the pad and is dropping dead, more or less. If you're too far to the front, you know, you don't really have any bounce, any rebound, and the stick is just too light. So just play around with the index finger, let the stick drop, and see how good or bad the rebound is. For me and my Pro Mark sticks, I noticed, or I memorized it, that my thumb is right before the A of American Hickory, and this is my perfect balance point. Step 2 would be to hit the surface with the stick, and at the exact time when the stick hits the surface, to open your fingers so that the rebound pushes the stick upwards and it stays in this elevated position. The trick here is to really pay attention on this micro timing. So if you open your fingers too early, the stick is uncontrollable, and if you open the fingers too late, then of course the rebound is already dead and the stick does not go up all the way. Step 3 after opening the fingers is to just close the fingers and make a second hit. Step 4 would be to repeat that process and have 2 consecutive strokes, and really pay attention to when you open and close the fingers. When you have that down, step 5 would be, of course, to do that with more than 2 strokes. And there you really have to pay attention when to relax, but passively relax your fingers, because the opening is not like actively opening your fingers. You let the rebound do that, and you only actively close your fingers. So again, as before, pay attention to the precise moments where you have to do that. And also pay attention that all the fingers stay on the stick at all times. Sometimes it happens, for example, that the pinky finger is kind of loose, but the best would be that all fingers would be touching the stick at all times. Step 6 would be to practice for consistency, of course. I would say start with 4 bars on each hand and work your way up to 8 bars. And by now you should be able to tell that this technique only works above a certain tempo. So for me, that's around 180, 185 BPM. Everything below that I play with the wrist, and everything above, of course, with the finger control. But I suggest that you don't practice up until that point that you feel solid on this technique with a metronome, so leave the metronome away, and practice what feels right, count in your head the bars, and only when you feel relatively solid, then bring in a metronome, figure out what's your lowest tempo that you can play that, and then try to play for 8 bars 4 bars, 16 bars, and so on, and try to really get solid and comfortable so you don't have to really think about this and the autopilot really kicks in this technique. Why I think this technique really allows you to play fast and for long periods of time without having breaks every 4 bars, for example, on Blastbeats, is because you basically have only one big movement that's from the wrist, the first hit, and then everything else is like 50% of the work is doing the snare and 50% are you doing with closing the fingers. So that allows you to save a lot of energy and hit very hard for a long period of time. One important thing to note here is that this technique does not work for everything, of course. As I said before, I use it mainly on my left hand for traditional blast beats because you always need the rebound to make this technique work. And if you play fills on the toms are not as reboundy as the snare, for example. This will not work. Also, the hi-hat does not have so much rebound or no rebound at all if you play the edge. And for example, the right cymbal does have a lot of rebound, but if you do accents on the bell, for example, this also won't work because the rebound direction is always very linear, so always up and down and not in a curve from playing the right cymbal and hitting the bell, for example. So I think it's very important to, at the same time, really develop your wrist action. I, for example, play finger control on the left because it stays on the snare. And with the right hand, I play a lot of wrist action, for example, with the Müller technique. I'm not saying this is the one and only technique for blast beats. There are many different methods that are proven to work for some of the fastest drummers out there. But just try it yourself and see what works for you. When it comes to double bass, I use one of the most common techniques for fast playing, which is the ankle motion. And since I mentioned in my last video that my friend Flo was the one introducing me to this awesome FootBlaster kickpad, and he happens to use the exact same technique, let's hear him explain how it works.
Hi, my name is Flo. I'm the drummer of Theotoxin and Akribni, amongst many others. Today I'm going to introduce you to my approach to the ankle technique. I use the FootBlaster kickpad, which is basically, for me personally, the best and realistic feeling pad which is out there at the moment. And the way I approached to the ankle technique was like bouncing the bell board like a basketball with my tiptoes. Like this motion. I keep my legs basically really steady, but I lift my ankle a little bit and only tip with my toes on the pedal board. After kind of getting into this feeling, I kind of try to relax and play a little bit heel down, but the whole motion is right out of my ankles. So, which basically really helps for me, or is helping me, is sitting way back on my drum throne, so it stabilizes my upper body. So it's quite comfortable for me to play in higher tempos, mid tempos, without any exhaustion of my muscles. Okay, my personal tip for practicing and training the ankle motion is just start with one leg at a time. Because when you try to rush or hurry, both legs are most out of sync, and this could be frustrating, definitely. So try to take your metronome, put some tempo in it, not the fastest tempo, I don't know, maybe a tempo which you feel comfortable with, like 80 ppm or 70 or maybe 90, whatever is comfortable for you. And try to get used to the whole motion, to the feeling, that you can also control the start and the beginning of the hits. Like when you kind of feel comfortable with the right leg, try to switch to the other leg, to the left leg. When you are right-handed, basically this is the weaker leg and feel maybe weird at the beginning, but also only try to train the left leg first before you go double, you know, like same, start and stop motion should be really controlled. And after a while you can try to, after a while I mean, at least it took for me a few days or weeks basically, to try to do it synchronized.
A big thanks to Flo for his tutorial on the ankle motion. I hope you got something out of this little video series on practicing drums. A big thanks to all these people over here for supporting the channel, and if you want to do the same, check out my Patreon page over here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.